The junior senator from California.
Reserving the right to object. Madam President, this bill is yet another attempt by our Republican colleagues to stoke fear about the migration we're seeing at the southern border rather than work collaboratively with us to actually address the issue and their stated concern. For a decade now, we have seen increasing arrivals at the southern border, especially of vulnerable populations. I'm talking families and unaccompanied children, many who are fleeing horrific conditions in their home countries, such as gang violence, drug trafficking, corruption, a global health pandemic, or the devastating effects of climate change, if not a multitude of these dangers. It is unsafe for many of them to remain in their countries, and so they make the arduous journey to the United States to seek asylum and, heaven forbid, a better future. Asylum seekers aren't just seeking a better life, they're simply trying to not die or to not be killed. Yet too many policymakers act like asylum seekers are simply choosing to come here. But given the horrific conditions in their home countries, it's really no choice at all. And so I'm deeply disappointed to see Republicans in both the House and the Senate distorting these desperate young children and families at the border into some sort of threat to our nation. Responsibly addressing migration requires going beyond partisan finger-pointing. We must instead thoughtfully address the root causes of migration and reform our border to ensure an orderly, secure, and well-managed process that treats migrants fairly and humanely. I've been frustrated that despite numerous, and I mean numerous, bipartisan meetings on immigration reform, our Republican colleagues seem more interested in scoring political points rather than pursuing meaningful solutions. They simply refuse to truly engage. So this bill would create onerous, repetitive, and unnecessary reporting and investigative requirements for the Inspector General of the Department of Homeland Security and require the Inspector General to report on these items every 60 days for the foreseeable future. Not to mention that many of the requirements in the bill are frivolous, irrelevant, or duplicative. For example, the bill would require the Department of Homeland Security to report on the number of migrants resettled when DHS isn't even the agency that handles resettlement of migrants. And DHS already has an Office of Immigration Statistics that does report on many of the same statistics that this bill would now require the Inspector General to report on. Finally, much of the rhetoric from my colleagues has centered around the large increase in the number of encounters at the border. Let me emphasize the word encounter at the border. However, these numbers ignore the large rates of recidivism that we're seeing. The ongoing use of Title 42 to block and expel asylum seekers at the southern border has led to an increase in the number of people crossing the border more than once. Under Title 42, single adults are rapidly processed at the border and sent right back to Mexico without a deportation order. What this arrangement has, in essence, done is incentivize repeated attempted crossings. According to the Migration Policy Institute, the recidivism rate is somewhere between 28 and 38%. So this encounter statistic that is being called for is actually misleading. Mr. President, I am more than willing to work with my colleague here to try to develop actual solutions to address migration at our border. But when I say solutions, I mean real solutions. Solutions that recognize the fundamental humanity of the desperate children and families that simply want to live to see their next birthday. Solutions that stay true to the values of our nation. So, Mr. President, yes, I object.